More than 5,000 years ago, long before cities rose in stone and kingdoms carved their names into the earth, one man made a final desperate climb into the icy heights of the Ötztal Alps. He did not know that his last breath, taken beneath the swirling snow and bitter winds, would echo across millennia. Nor could he have imagined that his frozen body would be found in 1991 by two hikers, triggering one of the most astonishing forensic investigations in human history, one that would blur the line between archaeology detective work and true crime analysis. This is the story of Ötzi the Iceman, the oldest unsolved murder mystery on record, and the first cold case in the most literal sense of the word. Imagine standing on the mountain ridge that day in 1991. Two hikers, Helmut and Erica Simon, spotted what appeared to be a strange bundle emerging from the melting ice-brown, leathery, human-shaped. At first, authorities assumed it was a recently lost mountaineer. Only later, after forensic testing, did scientists realize that the body found lying face down in the ice was more than 5,300 years old. His skin preserved, his gear intact, his final moments frozen in time. Not just a corpse, but a window into the ancient world. And suddenly, the race began not only to understand how he lived, but how he died. He wasn't simply a prehistoric wanderer. His clothing revealed a man skilled in survival. He wore a bearskin hat for warmth, a goat-hide coat, leggings stitched from deer hide, and shoes insulated with grass fibers woven so tightly they formed the world's first known winter footwear. Beside him lay a copper axe weapon far more technologically advanced than anything archaeologists expected from his era. Copper production implied social structure, mining knowledge, craftsmanship, and trade. Whoever Ötzi was, he wasn't ordinary. He belonged to a community sophisticated enough to forge metal hundreds of years earlier than previously believed. And then the clues deepened. Inside his quiver were arrows in various stages of completion, some finished, some still being carved. Across his belt hung a stone-bladed dagger, a fire-starting kit, a medicinal fungus used to treat parasites, and a woven grass mat scholars believe may have been used as a cloak, bedding, or even a temporary shelter. Every item told a story. Every tool filled a gap in our understanding of Copper Age life. But none of these discoveries compared to what came next. When scientists scanned his body with modern imaging technology, they discovered something shocking. Ötzi still had a flint arrow lodged in his left shoulder. It had torn through an artery. This was not an accident. This was not exposure. This was murder. Suddenly, the ancient man on the mountain was no longer just an archaeological wonder, he was a victim, a crime scene preserved by ice. And so began the world's oldest homicide investigation. What truly happened on that mountain ridge? Was he ambushed, assassinated, killed by a stranger, or betrayed by someone he knew? His story became a historical thriller, and every new detail uncovered another piece of the puzzle. Ötzi had defensive wounds on his hands, deep cuts between the fingers, the sort people receive when grabbing a blade or blocking an attack. His ribs bore evidence of older injuries, hinting that he had faced violence before. His stomach contained a final meal of dried ibex meat, einkorn wheat, and possibly red deer, suggesting he ate only an hour before he died. The attack was sudden, unexpected. His tools were still carefully packed. He wasn't running blindly. He was traveling with purpose, unaware danger was closing in. Chemical analysis of his clothing and tools revealed even more. Traces of blood from 4 different humans were found on his equipment. 1 on his knife, 2 on separate arrowheads, and 1 on his coat. Had he been defending himself, fighting off multiple attackers, protecting someone else? Each discovery added tension to the hypothesis that Ötzi was not simply a victim, but possibly a survivor of a brutal conflict shortly before his death. Studies of his copper axe stunned researchers further. The metal came from Tuscany, hundreds of kilometers away. This meant Ötzi either traveled far, traded widely, or belonged to a community with significant connections. Perhaps he wasn't merely a hunter. Some theories propose he was a leader, a shaman, a metalworker, or a messenger carrying something important. The arrow that killed him was shot from behind, suggesting betrayal or cowardice from his murderer. Then came another revelation. Tattoos, more than 60 of them, covered his body. Not decorative tattoos, but therapeutic ones, placed along acupuncture points that were only officially documented thousands of years later in Chinese medical texts. This meant Ötzi may have suffered chronic pain, and his community had developed early therapeutic treatments through trial and cultural memory. His tattoos connected him not just to Europe, but to humanity's shared medical evolution. Layer by layer, science rebuilt the man who lay silent in the ice for 50 centuries. He was about 45 years old, elderly by the standards of his time, short, strong, weathered, and carrying the legacy of a lifetime spent outdoors. His teeth told stories of malnutrition in childhood. His hair contained traces of arsenic and copper, evidence he worked with metal. His tools reflected both skill and purpose. His final journey revealed fear, fatigue, urgency. His last hours were a haze of exhaustion, a stomach full of food, and a desperate climb towards safety that ended with an arrow in the back. One of the most chilling discoveries came from examining the cut on his right hand, an injury only days old, suggesting a recent fight. He had been attacked before he reached the mountains. The pursuit continued. Someone wanted him dead badly enough to track him into the alpine wilderness. Whether it was a personal vendetta, a tribal conflict, or political rivalry, the motive died with him. But his body lived, and through it, so did his story. To stand before Ötzi today in the South Tyrol Museum is to look directly into the face of a man who walked the earth before the Great Pyramids existed, before Stonehenge was built, before written language recorded human thought. And yet his murder, his fear, his struggle for survival, they feel hauntingly familiar. He wasn't just an ancient mummy. He was a person caught in a moment of violence, a story that could belong to any era. The mountain didn't claim him. A human did. And 5,000 years later, we are still trying to understand why. If you were to walk through the bustling streets of ancient Rome around midday, you would quickly learn something surprising. Most Romans didn't cook at home. Their apartments were cramped, poorly ventilated, and often didn't have kitchens at all. Fires were dangerous, fuel was expensive, and families living in crowded insulae, the Roman equivalent of apartment buildings, relied on one thing more than anything else: the street food vendors who lined the city's alleyways, marketplaces, and intersections. These small stalls, called thermopolia, were the lifeblood of Roman daily eating, serving the rich, the poor, the hurried, and the hungry. And if you closed your eyes and listened, the world around you would come alive in a symphony of metal pans hissing, merchants shouting their prices, and customers bargaining for the best bowl of hot stew. The experience started with smell. Before you even reached the counter, your senses would be overwhelmed by the aroma of fresh bread baking in communal ovens, grilled, meats sizzling over charcoal garum, Rome's notorious fermented fish sauce wafting through the air, and sweet honey pastries being fried in bubbling oil. Rome was an empire of taste and indulgence, where food was not merely sustenance, but a cornerstone of identity, culture, and social connection. Even the wealthiest patricians, despite having kitchens and household slaves, often stopped by street vendors to grab treats like warm flatbread, spiced chickpeas, sesame rolls, or figs dipped in honey. But for the everyday Roman worker, the mason, the water carrier, the seamstress, the soldier, these stalls were essential. Without them, the city simply could not function. Archaeologists have discovered hundreds of thermopolia preserved in the ashes of Pompeii. Their counters, decorated with painted frescoes of food and animals, contain large clay pots called dolia, recessed into the stone to keep soups, wine, lentil stews, and porridges warm. The structure resembled an ancient food truck or deli counter. Customers walked up, pointed at what they wanted, paid a few bronze coins, and continued on their way. In the mornings, vendors served barley porridge sweetened with honey or dates, cheap wine mixed with herbs, and small pastries dusted with poppy seeds. By afternoon, the selection expanded to heartier meals: salted fish, boiled sausages, chickpea soup, olives, bread soaked in wine, and roasted meats for those who could afford them. Street food told you everything about Roman society: who worked, who starved, who prospered, and who simply tried to survive. For the poor, a loaf of coarse brown bread dipped in olive oil could be a full meal. For the working class, the thermopolium was their dining room. For slaves, it offered a rare taste of independence. For travelers and soldiers, it was a taste of home in a foreign land. It was in these simple bowls and ladles of food that the empire's pulse could be felt. One of the most famous staples was pulse, a thick barley or spelt porridge flavored with vegetables, cheese, herbs, or sometimes meat. Cheap, filling, and hearty. Pulse was the Roman equivalent of street-side oatmeal or ramen available everywhere, eaten by everyone. Another favorite was Iceman aumentada, a sort of ancient hamburger patty made of minced meat, wine-soaked bread, pepper, and pine nuts, then wrapped in fat and grilled. Vendors sold them on small buns, making them one of the earliest forms of fast food sandwiches. Sweet lovers had endless options too. Honey cakes, fried dough drizzled with syrup, nuts candied in honey, and fruit pastries stuffed with figs or raisins. Because sugar didn't exist in Rome, honey was the king of all sweetness, and the Romans used it generously. Vendors offered honeyed almonds, goat cheese pastries, and dates filled with nuts and dipped in wine. Some stalls even specialized in luxurious treats like stuffed dormice, though this was far too expensive for most citizens. But Roman street food was more than flavor. It was theater. The vendors were performers, entertainers, and businessmen all at once. They shouted loudly, using humor, exaggeration, and personality to attract customers. Fresh sausages, hot sausages, better than your mother-in-law's stew. Bread warm from the oven. Buy today or go hungry tomorrow. Crowds gathered, conversations swirled, and strangers bonded over shared meals. In a city where people lived stacked on top of one another, where noise drowned out silence and space was a luxury, food became the great equalizer. The Tabernet street-side taverns were even livelier. These served wine, stews, and grilled dishes, but also functioned as social hubs. Workers came to drink cheap wine after long shifts. Gamblers played dice in corners, musicians performed, and politicians made deals over plates of lentils and spiced pork. Some taverns were respectable, others were dangerous. Many fell somewhere in between places where reputations could rise or crumble in a single night. Inside these taverns, customers drank posca, sour wine mixed with herbs, ate bowls of vegetable stew, or shared platters of olives and cheese. A soldier could sit beside a baker, a foreign merchant beside a poet, and the lines between classes temporarily blurred under the dim glow of oil lamps. Life in Rome was chaotic, loud, and unpredictable, but the taverns offered a brief escape, a corner of the empire where stories flowed as freely as wine. Even in the grandeur of the empire's capital, the food stalls were essential. Senators ate delicacies at home-stuffed boar, peacock tongues, honey-glazed figs imported from Greece, but their slaves often purchased street food daily. And those same senators, while walking through the forum or returning from political duties, sometimes bought roasted nuts or honey pastries themselves. After all, human cravings transcend status. The vendors were as diverse as the city itself. Freedmen, former slaves, immigrants from the provinces, local families, and sometimes even entire guilds managed stalls. Some vendors built thriving businesses, passing them down through generations. Others lived day to day, hoping to sell enough to pay rent. But each contributed to the grand, chaotic rhythm of Roman life. The food was not always clean. Some stalls cut corners, diluted wine, spoiled meat, or reused oil far past its expiration. Ancient writers like Martial and Juvenal joked about street vendors giving people stomach aches or thieves using crowded stalls to pickpocket. But despite these risks, street food remained deeply woven into daily life. It was affordable, accessible, and comforting. By nightfall, as the sky over Rome turned bronze and purple, the lamps of countless thermopolia flickered to life. Workers returned, drawn by the glow and scent of cooking food. The city hummed with life conversations, laughter, shouting, sizzling pans, the clinking of cups. In those moments, the streets felt alive, connected, warm. Rome was not just an empire of marble and power. It was an empire of people tired, hungry, hopeful, finding solace in the simplest shared experience. Food. Street food in ancient Rome was more than cuisine. It was survival. It was culture. It was identity. It represented the heartbeat of ordinary life, full of noise, flavor, struggle, and joy. Through these vendors, we glimpse not the generals or emperors, but the everyday Romans who built the city brick by brick, lived in its shadows, and shared meals with strangers under the vast Mediterranean sky. Their voices echo through the ruins, their bowls preserved in ash, their recipes whispered through time. And in every bite of flatbread, every sip of sour wine, every bowl of warm pulse, we taste not just food, but history itself, alive, breathing, and deliciously human. If you step into the streets of Edo period, Japan between the 1600s and mid-1800s, you will discover a world ruled by discipline, hierarchy, and honor. Behind the majestic castles, peaceful rice fields, and bustling merchant districts lived an often overlooked group, the Ashigaru, the foot soldiers who formed the backbone of every daimyo's army. They were not samurai by birth, but they served samurai, fought beside them, and lived lives suspended between privilege and poverty. Their story is not grand like a daimyo's, nor poetic like a wandering ronin's, yet it reveals the true heartbeat of Edo Japan, where duty was survival, and loyalty was the only weapon sharper than steel. The day for an ashigaru began before sunrise. When the sky was still blue-gray and the morning mist covered the fields, the ashigaru barracks stirred with movement. Straw mats rustled, wooden doors slid open, and men quietly prepared for the long day ahead. Their living quarters were simple: tatami mats, small chests for clothing, and a place to hang their weapons. Food was modest steamed rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables. Sometimes dried fish was added if they were lucky, or if the daimyo was generous that week. Yet even this simplicity carried a sense of routine and pride, for the ashigaru understood that order was the foundation of strength. Unlike samurai, whose lives were devoted entirely to martial training and governance, ashigaru lived a dual existence. During times of peace, which defined much of the Edo period, they were expected to serve not only as soldiers, but as guards, laborers, messengers, firefighters, road builders, border inspectors, and even tax collectors. The Tokugawa shogunate had created a world where large-scale wars were nearly non-existent, so armies had to be useful in other ways. The ashigaru became the workforce behind the government's operations, ensuring that cities ran smoothly, villages remained peaceful, and daimyo domains stayed under control. Training remained at the center of their lives. Even in peace, an ashigaru was expected to stay ready, disciplined, and deadly. The mornings were filled with drills, marching, spear formations, archery practice, and sword exercises. Their primary weapon was the yari, a long spear capable of keeping enemies at a distance. While the romantic image of Japan revolves around the katana, the ashigaru spear line was often the most feared force on the battlefield. In the old days, a coordinated spear wall could tear through cavalry, shred enemy infantry, and determine the fate of war. Even in the Edo period, this legacy remained a point of pride. The ashigaru also trained with the tanegashima, the matchlock firearm introduced to Japan in the 1500s. By the time of the Tokugawa era, guns were tightly regulated but still part of military practice. Ashigaru were instructed on how to load, fire, clean, and maintain these weapons. They drilled in lines, learning to shoot in volleys, a tactic that once defeated powerful warlords and shaped Japanese warfare forever. Though they rarely fired these weapons outside of practice, the sound of gunpowder echoed through training grounds, reminding them of the chaos that once consumed Japan before the Age of Peace. Despite their vital role, ashigaru lived under strict regulations. They had ranks, uniforms, codes of behavior, and curfews. They were allowed to carry certain weapons, but not all. They had the honor of belonging to a warrior class, but not the glory or privileges enjoyed by higher samurai. Many ashigaru were hereditary soldiers whose families served the same daimyo for generations. Others were promoted from peasant backgrounds, rising through dedication and skill. Some even dreamed of eventually becoming full samurai, though such dreams were rare and difficult. Climbing the social ladder in Edo, Japan was almost impossible, yet hope lingered quietly in their hearts. Their days varied depending on the season and their assignment. In castle towns like Edo, Osaka, or Kyoto, Ashigaru stood watch at gates, guarded storehouses, and escorted officials. They patrolled streets at night, carrying lanterns and jingling staffs to alert citizens of their presence. They worked shifts at city firefighting stations, trained to rush toward flames in a tightly organized formation, risking their lives as easily as they would in battle. Fire was one of the greatest threats in wooden Japanese cities, so Ashigaru fire brigades were respected and feared for their bravery. In rural domains, their tasks expanded. They supervised rice transport, protected farmers from bandits, surveyed borders, and assisted magistrates in collecting taxes. During festivals or daimyo processions, Ashigaru marched in formation wearing crested armor or ceremonial outfits, showing the authority of their lord. These displays of order and loyalty were essential in maintaining political power. Even in peaceful times, the shogunate wanted the people to remember who ruled the land, and the Ashigaru helped deliver that message. But the Ashigaru's life was not only duty and discipline. Their personal world was full of complexities, joys, and hidden struggles. Most lived modestly, earning enough to support their families but never gaining real wealth. Some lived in barracks. Others lived in small homes within the castle town. Their wives often performed household chores, sewed clothing, and sometimes worked small jobs to support the family. Their children grew up watching their fathers drill, dreaming of one day holding a spear or serving a daimyo themselves. On rare days off, Ashigaru enjoyed simple pleasures. They visited tea houses, watched kabuki performances, listened to storytellers, or played games like Go and Shogi. Some wrote poetry, others practiced calligraphy, and a few even trained in arts like Kyudo, archery, or Kendo, swordsmanship, beyond their required drills. Even though they sat on the lower edge of the warrior class, many Ashigaru took pride in culture and learning, believing that discipline applied not only to war but to personal growth. Yet the shadow of conflict always lingered. Even though the Edo period was peaceful, Ashigaru never forgot the violent history of their ancestors. Stories of great battles like Sekigahara, Okeyazama, or Nagashino echoed through the barracks. Old veterans men who had served before peace told tales of charging into war, of desperate spear fights, of gunfire and smoke. These stories were lessons, warnings, and sources of pride. They reminded younger Ashigaru that their role, though peaceful now, existed because of the sacrifices of previous generations. The greatest challenge came during the final years of the Edo period, when foreign ships arrived and Japan could no longer remain isolated. Ashigaru began seeing cannons, rifles, and uniforms unlike anything they had known. Drills changed. Tactics changed. The world was shifting rapidly, and the old ways of the spear and matchlock seemed to fade like mist over the rice fields. Many Ashigaru were uncertain. Some welcomed modernization, others resisted it fiercely. But all felt the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. Their identity, once clear and honorable, became uncertain as Japan prepared to modernize its army. And when the Meiji Restoration arrived, the Ashigaru class was dissolved forever. Many became police officers, factory workers, or farmers. Others continued in military service under new systems. Some struggled to adapt, feeling as though centuries of tradition had been erased overnight, yet their legacy lives on. The Ashigaru were not legends in poetry or heroes carved into monuments. They were the everyday warriors who kept Japan functioning during one of its most peaceful and culturally rich eras. They embodied discipline without glory, service without reward, and loyalty without fame. Through their daily routines, struggles, and quiet dedication, they shaped the foundation of modern Japanese society. The Ashigaru teach us that history is not only written by generals, kings, or samurai. It is written by the ordinary soldiers who wake before dawn, train through pain, follow orders without hesitation, and protect their communities without expecting praise. Their story is one of humility, duty, courage, and endurance, a reminder that every empire, every era, and every nation is built not only by its heroes, but by the countless unseen hands that hold it together. In the end, the Ashigoro remain symbols of quiet strength, men who lived between war and peace, duty and survival, honor and hardship. Though their class vanished with the dawn of modern Japan, their spirit endures in every disciplined step of a soldier, every peaceful night guarded by unseen hands, and every act of service performed without recognition. Their lives remind us that true courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is found in those who rise before sunrise, work without praise, and carry the weight of history with steady, humble resolve. Their legacy stands silent but unforgettable.